Welcome, everyone, to this conversation. If you're in the room live or you're online watching it on recording, really thrilled to have you here and to have the next about 45 minutes to talk about open data with you and the impact that we can have on local communities. DataKind has been a longtime friend and fan of Open Data Week, and we are really thrilled to be back for another year here. As Ryan mentioned, this is the session on empowering communities using free and open software for local health indicators. What we're going to cover in today's conversation is a little bit about DataKind. I saw some people in the chat that excited to learn about DataKind. We're thrilled to tell you about us and a little bit about why we do this work. We're going to go into talking a bit about local data and ways that we can capture and collect information on our local communities using a tool called asset mapping. These two pieces of information really get us into the why do we want local data and how can we capture that information? And then finally, I will take you through a number of examples with DataKind's free and open software, which is called Ladder. And we will go through how we can take our locally collected data and use that against multiple large public data sets to get a better understanding of our communities and drive positive impact in those communities. DataKind, we are a global nonprofit organization. We are focused on using data, technology, and AI for positive social impact. Mentioned, I'm Caitlin Augustin. I am our Vice President of Product and Programs. So I lead the team that works directly with social impact organizations worldwide to identify the pain points they experience in trying to deliver positive change to their communities and the places where data, technology, and AI can be a part of that solution. And for us, it is success not just when we build a tool, we put a product into the world, but is when those solutions that are co-created are adopted widely and they contribute to actually solving those sector level problems. The way that we work at DataKind and our focus on design is human-centered. So we take an approach that is ethics, equity, and fairness centered from the beginning. Our focus is on actionable and interpretable insights. We want the work that we're doing to align to getting to positive outcomes in communities. We have an emphasis on cost efficiency. We talk a lot about free and open software, but we prioritize that because we know we are working with institutions who are resource constrained. So we want to not only lower the computing costs of anything we build, but also the human time spent in trying to learn a tool, engage with a tool, et cetera. And our systems are trustworthy. We employ best-in-class practices around data security following the secure by design principles. A little bit about our reach. DataKind, we've been around for almost 15 years. We've done over 450 projects around the world. We deploy software we've had our software deployed in over 35 countries. Our measures of success, I mentioned, is when we contribute to solving sector level problems. One of the ways we've seen that is with millions of dollars being redeployed into communities through access to benefits, as an example. And we take a really collaborative approach. So the software I'll be talking to you about today, Ladder, we actually built this first version that I'll be showing you with over 130 partners around the United States to ensure that we were solving the problems that they aim to solve. We're global, but we're also local to New York. So we've done a lot of collaborations in New York, just highlighting a couple of them. We do work contributing to student success with John Jay College and a wider CUNY network. One of our first projects ever was with New York City Parks, identifying trees that needed to be pruned so that they could be identified and proactively pruned so they wouldn't, say, fall during a major storm. We've partnered with 92nd Street Y and Giving Tuesday to identify philanthropy and philanthropic giving over the years. We worked with Vision Zero to reduce traffic deaths. We worked with the Plentiful and the Food Network community in New York on making sure that food gets to the right people at the right time. And we partnered with Harlem Children's Zone to help expand their data capacity. So we are deeply rooted in New York. We were actually founded out of Brooklyn and have a lot of community in the area. I also just mentioned that one of our goals and one of our sort of mandates is participating in events like this and really learning out loud. So we do like to publish our work, and we do encourage you to take a look at it and learn from our successes, yes, but also our failures, because as anyone who's working in this open source public data space, it's messy. You know that you can fail many different ways. And we really encourage an open dialogue and a shared learning about how we do this work in the world. All right, so that's a little bit about DataKind. I hope we excited you. My colleague Dave is in the chat, and if you want anything specific about DataKind, he can answer your questions as we go. But now let's start to talk about local data. So why do we want local data? Local data can help us drive positive local outcomes. This is a screenshot from a local news in Texas where one of our open source tools that DataKind built on environmental pollution releases was actually used by a community advocacy organization to be able to mandate change and cleanup in their communities to remove those carcinogens in their local land and water, which is pretty amazing. And that was the power of having that data at a local level to understand the impact. I'm a longtime Florida resident. I've bounced between Florida and New York a couple of times, but in Florida, our local Orange County representative was able to use DataKind's open data tools to identify households that were in need of rental assistance and get them enrolled in those rental assistance programs before they expired in COVID-19. It ended up being over 600 households that got enrolled in a weekend. And then finally, some of our work in New York, with Vision Zero, we built the first tool that estimated the traffic volume on every street in New York and was key to identifying places where interventions could be put in to reduce traffic deaths on those roadways. So this is what we can do when we have open data and we have that strong problem that we want to solve. Speaking of a strong problem, how do we come up with those problems? So it's not enough just to say, I have the data, what can I do with it? We want to be able to ask a specific question. And so when we think about what we can use data for, we can use it to actually understand our current world, right? Where are the heaviest traffic roads, right? That's an observation about the world. We can use it to reason through what is happening in the world. What will happen next if this intervention doesn't happen? If we don't get people enrolled in rental assistance dollars, people will lose their homes, right? We can reason through. And then we can take action. We can propose solutions based on that information. We can advocate for change because of that information. There is pollution in my community and a change needs to occur because of that. So understanding what we can use data for helps us form our research questions for what we want to do with that information and what information we want to collect. So DataKind uses this question format here for forming our problem statements. So what do we want to do? We want to propose a solution. We want to understand a problem. We want to anticipate a future need. So that might look like we want to bring a mobile library into our community because we don't have enough resources in our area for free books. It might be understanding a problem. There are huge wait lines at our given metro stop. Why is that? It might be anticipating a future need. We see unemployment is ticking up. We need then to prepare to provide additional support services in our communities. So we start with this, what do we want to do? Then we have to say, using what? Using local data, using information on food pantries, using unemployment rates, using information on the number of available housing units. So that's the type of information we need. And then we have to say what type of analysis we're doing. We're going to make a map. We're going to use paid software, free software. It might be a spreadsheet. And then to what end? So that some action can be taken, so that we understand our community and can advocate, so that we can better direct our resources within our programming, so that we can raise awareness in our area. And why do we take that action? So that a positive impact can occur. More individuals are served. More resources are distributed into an area. So this is the framework that we take when we think about what are we trying to do with this local data. And then some things that we want to think about when we're thinking about the data that we have on hand, we want to think about the accuracy, right? So it's not enough to say, I have this open data, I have this local data, but is it correct? And it's probably not. We'll be using some example spreadsheets where I pulled all the information from PDFs. That is a messy process. Probably not fully correct, but is the margin of error acceptable? For example, we'll be using address-based data. Some of those addresses won't show up as real data because they've got some weird formatting. But that's maybe losing 2 out of 100 addresses is acceptable for our project. So is that error rate acceptable? Is our data comprehensive? And who is represented in the data set? Talking about health indicators. If we have a data set that is disproportionately male, we can't talk about the global health aspect of a community if that community is 50% female, right? So we need to understand who is represented in the data set, what is represented, and when and where is that. If we're talking about New York City, but we only have data on one neighborhood in Brooklyn, that's not representative of the entire city. Talk about reliability, right? Does your information contradict other trusted sources? Is it from a reputable source? Was it collected responsibly? Is it accessible? Can other people access that information? And one thing I will say when we talk about local data, there are so many local resources. I did a first pass yesterday in prep for this, looking for lists of New York City health clinics. And my first lists for health clinics were actually from Reddit. So Reddit was my first resource. And that could be good, but we really need to understand what went into those data sources showing up on Reddit. And then your source 10, 11, 12 were from New York State, right? Maybe more reputable there. You need to think about relevance. Do you really need this information? And I really want to highlight this because when we're talking about social impact and we're talking about communities of impact, we have a bias, or certainly I think individuals, we want to know as much as possible, right? But do you need all the information to work on your problem? One example is DataKind works really closely with food pantry networks across the United States. And food pantries sometimes collect information like citizen status of individuals they're serving. That is sometimes helpful information. Do we need citizen status in our analysis about where to put food pantries? Probably not, right? That probably doesn't inform our analysis. And that is information that could be sensitive and it doesn't necessarily help answer our question. So we might say we could exclude that information from our overall analysis. Finally, we want to talk about the timeliness of data. How up to date is our information? And can it be used for real-time reporting? One example of this is Department of Housing and Urban Development for a long time managed fair and equitable housing database. I believe it's offline now. But that database was really only updated every decennial census. So you were looking at data that could have been 10 years old about the population distributions in a given geography. And that was the government suggested best resource for understanding the population of a given area. Now, I mentioned I've lived in New York and I've lived in Orlando. Orlando has almost tripled in size in the past decade. So looking at a decade-old set of information would not give an accurate picture of where the need is for increased housing in a particular area. So even if it is the most current data set available, it is not viable for real-time reporting. So understanding that too, when we're working with public data, the most current data set still might not be the most up-to-date set of information. Okay, we've talked about why we would want local data. We've talked about forming a data question and some of the ways to interrogate the data that we are pulling into our system. Let's talk about how we actually get that data to begin with. And this is a process called asset mapping. I've got a number of resources at the end of this slide deck that anyone can access. It's in the public folder that's linked for the event. But asset mapping is a really excellent community-driven tool for identifying and mapping the assets in a community. And assets are things that are important to that community. They can be tangible or intangible. So they could be services, resources, connections, people, particular organizational or cultural assets. And they typically fall into these 6 categories of political, built infrastructure, human, natural, financial, cultural, and social networks. So this is a way to think of what is in my local community and how might I capture that and what type of information do I capture. So the way that we start asset mapping, this collection of information to our local community, is first defining our community, defining what we want to do with that information collected, that problem statement, selecting what assets we want to identify in our community, developing our plan to collect that information, collecting it, and then actually mapping or analyzing it. And so taking us through step by step here, and I saw there's a question in the chat around, are there links to tools? Yes, there are many links. The most basic version of these is actually like spreadsheets. So first, we want to think about defining our community. Now, our community could be a specific group of people. We might say our community is women ages 18 to 25. It could be geographic boundaries. My geographic boundaries are my zip code 11202. So we need to understand what our community is and what we want to do with that information collected. And it might be you want to do something to reduce friction. You want to enhance your work. You have a new idea you want to test. Ways to think about that physical geography, the most common level is through the census geographic levels. Most tools, including the ones DataKind made, use the census levels of tract ZICTA, which is a zip code analogy, county and state. And you can see this mapping here that a census ZICTA, which is a zip code tabulation area, is pretty close to a USPS zip code, but USPS zip codes are adjusted on a regular interval and they are not fully mapped to the population size. Some places that you can capture information on this type of geographic level or understanding what you would do with the data is looking at things like OpenStreetMap, which is a real strong geographic resource. And then I have this quick example of why might you do this? So if you're in the South Orange Maplewood community, you've probably been following that there's a big community action program happening around putting in bike lanes. And they are actually conducting an asset mapping approach by collecting information on bike and traffic safety in the area. So once we've identified our geography, we've identified the type of question we want to answer, we need to think about those assets themselves and thinking about it in a way of what does your neighborhood have or need to support future initiatives. And when we have that in hand, you can have a plan to collect the information. And in-person, site-by-site surveys are excellent, but there are also ways to capture that information through things like social networks, the Chamber of Commerce, if you're looking for business information, or community foundations. So looking at tools like Yelp or Foursquare or Google Search or Microsoft Bing that has these local guides can give you a sense, particularly for those tangible resources in your community. Other resources are things like ParkServe, which is a tool from the Trust for Public Lands that shows all the green space in the United States. So if you're looking at that asset of that natural asset, this is a great resource. Also, we're at Open Data Week. New York City's Open Data has a ton of data sets on infrastructure and local communities. So once we have all that data in hand, or those questions, we want to collect the data. We want to understand what supports our assets. What are pieces of additional information that we'd want? That could be things like open times. It could be things like privately funded, publicly funded. It could be tags around their influence and their legitimacy. Pieces of information that would help us understand how that asset might change over time. That is our asset mapping process, how we get information on our local community, on our local area. And again, there are many resources out there, but the fundamental approach is we need to know what we want to capture, we need to have a plan to capture that information, and we need to track that information. Now, once you have information, your goal is to create a map or something that demonstrates this is the information I have and I want to do something with it. And this is where DataKind's tool, ladderhub.org, is one tool that you can use to get into this place. So we created LadderHub because we were asked this question of, could we analyze local data that where we could identify regions where there was a high need for social service initiatives, but there was low coverage, basically identifying what are commonly called cold spots, so that local actors, particularly local health services and nutrition service providers, could use that information to better reach individuals and families who were experiencing food insecurity with the resources that they needed. So this is saying we provide services in a whole area, but we are missing key neighborhoods. And without this type of analysis, we can't understand where we're missing those areas. And that was initially the static analysis. So there's some pictures there, but it turned into a tool, basically saying there are commercial tools on the market that create maps. I'm sure many people on this call have used them, but these nonprofits and social service providers are often priced out of being able to use those tools effectively. So we wanted to build a commercial competitive but free tool. So having the equal ease of use, the equal sort of robustness, but free. And we wanted it to be able to be used to foster this deeper understanding of community needs. So not only the information that an individual entity might collect, but also a complex set of information that we could pull across that area to put that individual asset data in context. And finally, we wanted it to be a tool that was collaborative, because for anyone here working in social services, you know that you're just touching a piece of the elephant, right? You're a piece of the pie. A food service provider might provide meals on a regular basis, but they are not aware of the individual who's receiving meals might also be receiving child support services, might also be receiving legal aid. So we wanted to build a tool. And in fact, the collaborative approach, we took over these 100+ people weighing in, said that collaboration was a necessity. They needed to be able to share their insights in a collaborative way. So ultimately, what we did was, through this collaborative process, we identified 11 different data sources that existed at the local to federal levels with 49 different indicators. And I'll just say, we are actively taking suggestions for what that 50th indicator should be. So please, as you use our tool and you look for new data sets to add in, we're eager to add them in, and pulled in over 6 million rows of data to give a comprehensive analysis of what is happening at a local level from a health, nutrition, a community perspective. And this tool is owned and stewarded by DataKind, but you as a user are the owner of your data. Your data sharing is only those individuals you grant permission to. And right now, it's only individuals who you define as part of your team or your organization. And from a data security perspective, the data is encrypted at rest, which means that it's actually not stored as its data, it's stored in an encoded fashion. Okay, so that's a little bit about this tool and why we created it. I'm going to give you just some little bit more on uploaded data guidance and then go into the examples, which I know everyone is eager for. So just again, data protection. If you're uploading data to the internet, you want to prepare your data before uploading and remove personally identifiable information and protected health information. Flagging this, working in social services, we often have a lot of individual level data. Minimize the data, uploading just what you need for your analysis. Ensure you have the rights to that uploading that data. Check it before you share it outside of your self-rights before sharing to your team. Operate with a principle of least privilege, ensuring that only the people who need to see the data see it, right? And I'll just say our tool, like every commercial tool out there, we have really robust data incident response processes. So should you encounter a problem, please use the reporting process to do that, and we can help you manage. Okay, so now let's actually get into using this tool. And I'm just going to quickly look at the chat here. Yep. Okay. Yep. And I see questions about how to log in, which I will show you in just a second. All right. So I'm going to start with an example here where what do we want to do? We want to better understand healthcare needs in our community using available data on healthcare locations, community chronic disease diagnoses, and community economic indicators, so that we can advocate to bring additional free mobile health clinics to our community to ensure access to healthcare for all, so that we can improve the quality of life for all individuals. That's what we want to do. Now, following my asset mapping approach here, I'm just giving you the steps I went through for this data. So I'm going to center the community on a zip code in the Bronx, which is 10459. And I'm going to look at my data at the census tract level. So I've said I have my geography as a geographic boundary of a zip code, and I'm going to look at my data at that neighborhood level of the graph. What am I going to do with my data? I'm going to capture this information in order to be able to advocate for additional community health support. The asset I'm looking for is healthcare providers in my geography. And how I'm going to collect it, I'm collecting this using online tools, but in the future, I could verify with site visits and community conversations. You have access to all the data sets and the maps, but now I'm going to take you through this example. Okay, Ladder is our tool. This is a relaunch or a rebrand. We recently changed the name. You'll see there's a little bit of old name, which is high equity across this, just noting that. So you're going to get here and you're going to have to sign up. And now you can do an SSO with a Google email address or a Microsoft address, no cost to sign up, but you do need an account. And this is how you are able to then upload your own data. I'm just going to log in with my demo account that I created for this event. And I'm going to show you a couple of things in here. So the first thing is your actual account here. So you have a profile, your name, your email address. You can change your password. You can enable two-factor authentication. You can log out of other browser sessions. I'll note this is really handy. I've done a lot of these demos and I've forgotten to log out. So it's great to be able to log out of someone else's computer. You can also delete your account. So these are some of your basic just profile control. You can, again, form a team. So right now I have a DataKind demo team here that I'm just going to show you. I can add people by email address and I can select their role. So you can say, I'm going to invite someone to be a shared team owner with me so they can add or delete people from the team. They can upload data. They can share data across the team. You can have someone who can contribute. They can't manage the team, but they can upload data and they can request that data gets shared. The team owner is the only person who can actually share the data. Or you can add someone to your team as a viewer that they can just view what's been added. So these are really helpful steps. And then you can change people's roles. So I have two people on my team. If I were to manage their role, right now they're contributors, I could change their role because I am the team owner. So just showing you that function that you can create a team for whatever purposes you have, and you can actually create multiple teams as well. So you could be a part of a departmental team, an organizational team, a specific research projects team, etc. Okay, so that's just the kind of about that. I'll also quickly point you to, there's a privacy policy. The license this is released under FAQs, data dictionary, terms of service down here. Data dictionary, let me just quickly show you that. Data sets that are globally available are shown with a globe next to them. So anyone can access this data set. You have the publisher, where did that data come from? What was the name of that table? So this is from CDC Places data, the specific variable, how it shows up in that data set, the name that shows up on the map. So when we get into Ladder, you'll see that every variable is named with the variable name, the year of publication, and the publisher. How it's measured in the data set, how it's displayed as a percentage, the actual description of it, and the source URL. Now, one thing I'm going to note for everyone here, because we are in an active cleanup process, as federal data sets have been taken offline, we are actively going through and updating these to stable data sources. So CDC Places data has been online and offline a couple of times. So just noting that we are actively working with the open data community to ensure stable copies of all public data sets. You see the different geographies these data sets exist at, what year they are representing, and what year they were published. So the CDC publishes sort of 2 years off of when the data was collected, how frequently it's updated annually, any particular notes about that. So pointing you just to the data itself. And with that, let's go into an example. Okay, going back to my problem here, I wanted to look at healthcare information, health stats in my community, and healthcare providers. I have a lot of publicly available information. I'm picking that I'm going to work at the census tract level. So what do I have here at the census tract level? I can open up, I see I have a lot of health information. I have a number of chronic illnesses and the prevalence rates in my adult community. So heart disease, COPD, diabetes. I have self-assessed health status. I have insurance coverage, high cholesterol, high blood pressure. So I have a lot of health indicators. I also have information on housing and transit. Have they had a threat of utility services being turned off, lack of reliable transportation, experiencing of housing insecurity? On a nutrition level, I have information from the USDA on access to food, like quality food. So indications of this are in a food desert based on different geographic levels. I have food insecurity rates published by Feeding America. I have access to food stamps or SNAP benefits, and I have information around where SNAP retailers are. And then from a population level, I have total population information. I have it broken down by age groups. I have income information. And then I have the same information broken down by demography and different statuses within that as a crosstab. And then finally, I have information from the Social Vulnerability Index. So this is a CDC tool that identifies a community's resilience to shocks and stressors based on a number of key themes. So there's an overall vulnerability index, and there's one based on like economics, one based on household characteristics, one on minority status and their housing type. So there are subgroups there as well. So that's all the publicly available information I have. And then I can upload data here. So I am going to show you an upload data process. So just noting again for everyone here, you can access the data sets that I'm using as an upload in the deck here. So I'm going to go to data upload, and this is one of the exciting features here of adding your information to what's already there in the tool. So I'm going to click to upload data. I'm going to use primary care information because I'm looking at those healthcare providers in the Bronx for my particular zip code. And here's just a good piece of information is you can add 2 indicators. So if you already had a set of primary care providers in the Bronx that was, say, from 2024, and you only wanted to add those new primary care providers from 2025, you could upload to an existing indicator and it would check and remove duplicates and only add those new records to your existing data set. In this case, for this example, I'm going to go to add new indicators and upload them. So for your data upload, you can upload data at the geographic levels that our public data exists in, the census tract, zip code, and county, but you can also upload individual addresses. And that's what I'm going to do here because I'm looking at the specific locations of healthcare providers. I have to define my source. In this case, this is New York City, Bronx specific data. What year? This is 2025 data. And then I have to populate the information here. So this has read in from my uploaded CSV. I need to pick the site name. So I'm going to put the name is the site name. I have to pick my address. So I've got my street address, I've got my city, I've got my state, and I've got my zip code. So this says what piece of information maps to what part of the geocoding process. And I need to name my indicator. So I'm going to say this is primary care Bronx as the indicator name. I can make my value be relatively sized if I say had number of beds, number of people served per day. In this case, I only want a location indicator. So I'm saying there's no value size to scale on. It's just the locations. I have to pick what domain I want this to go into. I'm going to say it goes into my health domain. And then I can add notes. And so in this case, I'm going to add in phone numbers. So you would be able to have that information on how to access the primary care. And I'm going to run validation. And so what this validation step does, it goes against the geocoder. And we use the census's geocoder. And it looks at all the data that I uploaded and says, okay, here's all the data that's been validated. And you can download that CSV, meaning there was an address found for each of these locations that I uploaded. And here's ones that have exceptions. We couldn't find an address, right? So this says it's an invalid geography. I'm guessing I had probably in this data set, maybe a mismatch between the address and the zip code that it came up. And you can also download that exception list also. And then I can click upload indicators and it says a map has created successfully. So I have my data, it's now ready to use and I can use it in my analysis. So I'm going to go click to get started. And what I want to do, and you can see now I have my data down here. So I said I wanted to look at the census tract level. I wanted to look at the health in my community. So I'm going to look at fair or poor health status in a community. I'm also going to look at the lack of health insurance, because what I'm trying to figure out is where might it be most beneficial to my community to put in, to bring mobile clinics in. So I'm going to say those two variables. And then I'm going to go to my address indicators, and I've done a couple of practice uploads. So these are actually all the same data sets, but this is the one I just uploaded, primary care Bronx. I'm going to click. Okay. And my map is generating, and I'm going to go to my zip code, which was 104509. So I'm going to find that Bronx, and it's going to zoom me over there. And so now I'm in my zip code, and what we can see is we can hover over each of these census boundaries, and we can identify we can see for this census tract that the one I'm hovering over, which is 12701, over 35%, 36.3% of individuals have rated themselves as having fair or poor health status. And over 20%, 21.5% of individuals have a lack of health insurance. And I can see by a coloration here where that is occurring. So I can see where the darker colors means that there is a higher prevalence of my indicators. The lighter colors mean there's a lesser or fewer individuals in that status. And then I can see where all my primary care clinics are, where I have those. And so we can start to say, oh, there are areas where there are gaps, right? So we have, say, this darker red census tract over here that has only one health clinic over here on the border. And we can also hover over those little clinics, and we can start to see. So that's the Bronx Care Family Wellness Center. So that's the only one that is touching this census tract. And there's nothing else in a 4 census tract area around there. So we might start to say that could be a place where we might recommend bringing a mobile clinic in. You can also download your map, and you can also kind of toggle to see the intersection between the different variables as well. You can also filter here to say maybe you only want to see health status in the 20 or more. So we can start to filter to only get those more extreme levels to give us greater insight. And just as a quick example, this is just a screenshot of what I made here. And you can see there are these really kind of gap areas in the community where there are no primary care providers, but there is this indicators that might suggest more need. With about 10 minutes left, I'm just going to point you to another example here. Look at, and then I will answer some questions as well. So just pointing to a second example around food distribution, looking at, we have a colleague who works in delivering mutual aid in Brooklyn, wanting to understand where to better deliver their food distribution events. So they want to understand where food banks are currently located, where, what the SNAP benefits uptake is, what food insecurity looks like, so they could offer additional food resources to community members near their homes so they can reduce food insecurity in the community. So again, same process, looking at, say, the city of Brooklyn, looking at the census tract level, information you're capturing, how you collect it, the data sets available, and then the map here. And I'll just, rather than taking you through that same upload process, I'm going to just show you here a visual. So this shows you the data set. This is where all the New York City, so this is actually New York City Open Data, where all the food pantries are in Brooklyn. And I've just highlighted a couple of example kind of gap areas where there appears to be potential for high need, but service location is not in that area, meaning you could then perhaps use this to start your analysis. That's a kind of a quick tour through Ladder. We're eager for you to use and engage with it. I do want you to note that this is a tool in active development. DataKind is committed to building and improving upon this tool for at least the next year before we put it into a stable maintenance phase. Right now, there are some functionality limitations. There are some interpretation limitations. So noting that we are not saying there are causal relationships. We're looking at these correlative relationships. But we have an active product roadmap and we are eager for your feedback. Right now, we're doing this public analysis at these 3 levels. There was a question of, oh, if I can look at it on at a congressional or county district level, these additional geopolitical boundaries. Yes, that is our next phase. So we are actively working to bring those boundaries in so that you will have that additional geographic level. You can currently save your uploads. We're looking to save all of your analysis. And we are actively building out a developer API for access, which will be available over the summer. And we started with that mapping level analysis, but we understand basic additional statistics would be really great. So please, if that's something you'd want, use our feedback form and give us that insight. And I just sincerely do want you to give feedback. Every single page has a feedback button. Use it. You get this form and you can give us your feedback and we read it and we're actively working against it. Let me just show you 2 more things and I'll stop sharing my screen and answer questions and hand it back over to Ryan. DataKind, I mentioned it's not just that we want to build tools, we want those tools to be used. So if this looks useful to you, our team is looking to support deployment within your institutional context. So we provide ongoing training. We want to make sure that it works for your institutional policies for things like data sharing. And we understand tool adoption is change management, and we want to support that. We are actively trying to evaluate our tools, right? These tools are only as good as they are useful and they are trusted. Looking for, again, partners who want to evaluate the tool and evaluate the impact of the tool on their program. So if that sounds like you, please reach out to us at DataKind. And finally, the website is ladderhub.org. My email is caitlin@datakind.org. There is a form that we shared out with this calendar invite that you can continue to use to submit your use cases and to work with us to build those out with you. So I'm going to quickly look at questions in the chat and maybe hand it over to you, Ryan. So.
Sure. Thank you so much, Caitlin. Such wonderful work and such a great explanation of this tool. That was exciting for me, for sure. Couple parts, I think, looking through the Bronx and sort of the speed from CSV to Insight was really, I think, the most impressive part for me as someone who's like in the weeds, going through CSVs, doing a lot of that work on my own. So it's so interesting. If anyone here would like to learn a little bit more about open data, there are still events coming throughout the week. You can see them at open-data.nyc. On that site, you can also sign up for our newsletter, get a daily rundown of events, and find links to morning coffees that the team does each day to start off our day of events. Just a quick plug for some events that I'm looking forward to this afternoon. There's an event about mapping iconic sandwich spots across the city using AI. So like I'm carrying my personal lifelong New Yorker bias with me to that one to argue with a robot about which sandwiches are better. And then there's also a fun one about arcade games, squirrels, and their stashes of nuts happening this afternoon as well. So check out our upcoming events. Again, another thank you to Caitlin for giving this wonderful presentation. And if there are any questions you'd like to address now, please feel free.
I think I captured a lot of them as we went, but just re-echoing, please reach out to Dave or I. Our emails are in the chat. We'd love to connect with you to hear about how this could be made useful to you and how we can partner. And case support form. Yep, that's linked directly in the event, the calendar invite. I can also just copy all of it over to you right now. Here, sorry, I'm screen sharing, but let me just dump all this directly in the chat. So I think with that, then we'll see you on the other side. And then all the slide, all the materials, they are all in the folder for this event. So everyone can access the slides. You can access the sample data. You can additional example data that I didn't run through. All of it are in the folder of assets that was linked in the Open Data Week event page.